In the late 1980s, when I first started programming, writing computer programs, and granted, I didn't do it intensely, but that's where my journey with computers began. I never thought that one day I would spend years explaining computers to a broad audience of people, right? When I say broad audience, not all at once. Somewhere in the year 2013, I ended up on a journey where I would explain computers, among other things, um, to the general public. And so when I look back and I add it all up, you look at the average number of people that I engaged with in the public, it was about 25 people a day on the low side. Oftentimes it would be about 25 people a day, and then of course on much busier days we're looking at 40 more people. But I'm going to look on the low side of how many people I've talked to. And so we look at 25 people a day during a 5-day period, right? Each week, 5 days a week, 25 people a day. We're looking at about roughly 125 people a week, and that comes out to about 500 people a month on average, right? And that ends up totaling up to almost 7,000 people a year, right? 7,000 people a year. And so I've been talking to the general public about computers primarily, but electronics in general, for about 9.5 years, almost 10 years. And so when you look at that, right, over that span of time, that's nearly 60,000 people that I've had face-to-face conversations with. Unique people, individuals, strangers, people I've never met before, straight cold conversations, right? And then you add in the pandemic, the 2020 pandemic, and the people that I spoke to over the phone during that time frame, right? Then we're looking at about 7,000 people over a 3 to 4 month period. And so when you group in that number of people, that's nearly 70,000 people that I've spoken to in about a 10-year period. So I've spoken to about 70,000 people over that period. And in that capacity, I'm selling computers, I'm selling electronics to people. And when I look at the numbers when I first started tracking them, right? And this is the numbers that I've tracked. This doesn't include the untracked numbers, right? But the numbers that I can tell you verifiably, I've sold about $5 million worth of computers and electronics, primarily computers. So $5 million worth of computers that I've sold since 2019, when I officially started tracking my sales. And so now if you look at the numbers prior to that, right, I've sold way more than $5 million in computers, right? So I've talked to nearly 70,000 people, and I have sold over $5 million in computers and electronics, and I've sold over 1,000 computer and other technical services contracts, right? And so you'd say, oh wow, that's great, you must be an expert in sales and in explaining computers. No, not really, right? I'm still an introvert. And so, but I have a lot of experience. So yes, I am an expert in simplifying computers and doing it in such a way that is measurable, right? And so what I want to explain today is a simplified description of computers that's accurate, but that removes much of the technical jargon. So, what is a computer? Well, let's start with the computer processor. Say it kind of looks like this, maybe a little thicker than this, but it's a thin chip, a very thin chip made out of silicon, right? And all of your software runs through it. So all of your computer programs, they run through this thing, okay? It basically manages electricity in a very structured and formalized way to make your software run, your computer programs run. And so when it's running on a computer, all that electricity coming out of the wall or coming out of the battery, that's a lot of heat. So much heat that it could burn, it could melt, right? If you don't manage it right. So how do you manage that on a computer? Well, they put this thing on top of it called a heat sink, right? It's a piece of metal, it's a block of metal on top of this thin chip, and it's going to pull all that heat off of the chip, okay? And so while this computer chip is running, all this heat is going here. But some of this heat is also coming out the other side. So we have to take some special type of glue called thermal paste. And we're going to put this glue on here. And this glue is what holds the chip onto the main motherboard, the main circuit board. So when you open up your laptop, right, if you ever open up your laptop case and look inside, you're going to have a circuit board, you're going to have your processor, which you really won't see it. And then you're going to have this main wedge of metal. This is what you'll see. And you'll think this is the computer processor. It is not. But you got your processor, you got your heat sink, you got the thermal paste underneath, and you got your main motherboard. Well, this thermal paste that holds it onto the motherboard, it is designed in such a way where it also removes some of the heat. And over time, as heat is generated by this processor, it is wearing away that thermal paste. Okay? Now, when you're looking at the quality of a computer, part of the quality of a computer has little to do with what kind of processor is on there. Hey, forget about talking about Pentium and an i3 and an i5 versus an i7. Doesn't matter. AMD Ryzen 3, Ryzen 5, Ryzen 7. None of that matters if this thermal paste goes away. Doesn't matter at all. The computer's toast. And you might have enough thermal paste to keep things in balance, but as more of this thermal paste wears away, right, then the sensors on the computer kicks in and says, oh, it's too hot. And it's keep dialing down that electricity that's being fed into it. So brand new out of the box, yeah, everything's going great, but as this thermal paste wears away, because this is fine. Nothing's wrong with this part, but underneath, that starts wearing away, right? And so now less and less electricity is being fed to it because the sensors are seeing that it's getting hot, right? So then what's the difference between a regular computer and a gaming computer? Gaming computer is not all about playing games. A gaming computer is the most reliable computer you can have for running Windows, if Windows is your operating system of choice. But it could also be Linux, right? So either way, the reason why a gaming computer is the best way to run Windows is because it has better thermal management. It oftentimes has 4 vents on each side of the laptop models, and the desktop models has a bigger frame with better airflow and moving that hot air out of there. That's the number one reason why those computers last you longer and gives you a better investment, because of that thermal management. Because without that thermal management, this is just going to burn off and you're going to have a less an investment. And so people are like, hey, what is the difference between hard drive, RAM, and a processor? Well, the hard drive, right, let's use this. The hard drive is where all of your little goodies are stored, right? That's where all your files are stored, including the programs. And then when you click the launcher program, it gets a copy of it from there into here, into your RAM, right? And then your processor is going to feed off of that RAM. So it's going to feed off of that to run the programs between here, between a RAM and between a processor. That's where your programs run, right? Okay. And then when you click save in that program, the copy that's been modified here in the RAM, then it's permanently pushed back to the hard drive, whether it's a solid state or a mechanical drive. And that's the basics of the computer, right? And so you ask yourself, okay, how do I really know this? Well, the cost of the computer, in most cases, reflects the quality of the computer. Hard to say, hate to say it. It's not like other things that you might buy where you can shave some corners here and shave some corners there to get what you want. Electronics, they're not handcrafted goods, and they don't have that legacy of handcraftedness that some other types of things that we might look at obtaining may have. And so the quality of the computer, right, is based on what the cost of it is in many cases. Because if you look at that part, let's say you compare a Pentium or an Intel Core i3, let's just use that. And I'm not biased towards Intel versus AMD. It's the same thing on the AMD side, right, if you go that way. But Intel Core i3, that part is going to cost more than a Pentium. An Intel Core i7, depending on which type of i7, that's going to cost more in most cases than an Intel Core i5. So the quality of the part is going to dominate that overall cost of the machine. You have different costs for RAM and different SSDs. I can have two SSDs. They both are 512 gigabytes. This SSD particular one, it costs $300. Just saying. This one costs $50. They put this in the computer, right? And you're like, okay, great, I got 512 gigabytes. They're both fast SSDs compared to a mechanical hard drive, but this one runs faster and lasts longer than the one that was $50. But the cost of the computer goes up accordingly. So that explains the quality and the longevity and what you get out of the computer. That's how they all compare. They don't compare on processors or amount of gigabytes or anything of that sort. It's the quality of the individual components all together. The quality is the sum of the parts. That's basically it. So that's what a computer expert sees as the state of the computer in lay people's terms, right? In lay people's terms, that's how you describe computers from A to Z. Then the other side of it's going to be software, but that is a conversation for another day.